Okay, so catch up on stitch.
Yeah, so just before we get started on Pablo, I thought I'll just touch base. So thank you for replying to my email about my query. I went to that clinic and the way that the lady had addressed the nipping was to back them up, like with a bit of a bump on the nose.
Oh, and
Um,
I had a quick, because I glanced at your email really quick when I got back to you, and I think I replied in a way that the horse bit or the horse sort of nipped at the person maybe out of the blue,
yeah.
but she was asking the horse to
Uh,
back up and then the horse nipped, correct?
she was asking the horse to back up. So her hand was very close to the halter,
Mm-hmm.
asking him to back up, and he was just getting nippy, obviously, because he was a bit nervous, or something. And then to punish him, I suppose, she bumped on the halter a few times and backed him up a bit harder.
Yeah, and I
Um,
love that that was reframed as a consequence. Yeah, because
yeah,
I
yeah,
go
and I,
consequence and punishment are not that, they're very close
yeah,
cousins.
yeah, exactly. So I read your email and it actually made sense. And I thought that, well, yeah, that sounds so logical now that I read your email. So yes, thank you for that
Well, and
response.
the only thing I would add to that sort of not really grasping the situation the first time is everything I
Mm,
said still applies. But
mm,
if I'm asking a horse to do something like back up or take the bit or put the saddle on, and that's where the nipping occurs because I'm in close proximity,
mhm,
I look at it first and foremost as the horse communicating to me, I'm not comfortable. This is not
mm,
easy. I'm not comfortable. So, giving a consequence to an opinion doesn't really
mm.
build trust. I go, but we have to
No.
understand the only way our horses can give us information is through their behavior. And
Mm,
so instead of labeling behavior good or bad, I go, if I'm already in close proximity and the horse is being a little bit aggressive in the context of, say, the task of backing up, the first thing I need to know about that is the horse is maybe nipping at me because backing up is physically uncomfortable, physically difficult,
yeah,
which it can
yeah, okay.
be, right?
Yeah.
So, like in that case, instead of making the horse back up faster and harder, I go, okay, nipping is not okay. I need to increase the distance for my own safety. But that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean I have to push the horse backwards. I can just move myself and increase the distance and have a quick think about, does he nip in another context, or is this horse only nipping because I'm asking him to back up? And that would
Yeah, okay.
be sorting out what that communication means from the horse. Like that to me is the
Right.
important part because maybe that horse never nips otherwise. And that would be very
Mm-hmm.
clear information that asking him to back up, there's a physical difficulty that's creating a level of discomfort that he's going, stop that. I can't do that.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Is
so
backing up quite hard for horses, is it? Like
absolutely.
physically, can it be hard? Right, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially a horse that's been, dropped through the back and disengaged. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
use backing up. And even when I'm riding horses, when they start to learn how to engage, sometimes they'll offer a few steps backwards, kind of like they're trying to put that pelvis around the other way. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you think of sort of the pelvic bone at an angle like this, right, to the
Yeah.
thigh bone like this, when
Mm-hmm.
they're disengaged, the relationship is sort of going like this. And
Yeah.
when they back up, they have to do this. I'm being pretty extreme, but if my hand is
Yeah.
the pelvic bone, that
Yeah.
rotation
Yeah.
around the hip joint is something like this. And
Yeah.
so if they've been here disengaged for a while with the pelvis backwards, then when you ask them to back up, you're asking them to do that. It's
Oh, so
quite,
that's quite hard.
it could be
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
difficult. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's where we have to move way past tasks and obedience. I go because the
Mm,
resistance that we get from our horses most of the time is information about whether or not the horse feels safe doing what we're asking, or
mhm.
the horse feels comfortable doing what we're asking. And that
Yeah.
comfortable, uncomfortable question can also go to, there could be a light threshold where it's just physically hard, but there could be a pain threshold that we know nothing about,
Mm, yeah.
right?
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and
And oh yeah.
I was just going to say, kind of like us, the more somebody pushes us into something that's uncomfortable or painful, we're either going to shut down or we're going to come out fighting.
Mm,
Like those are sort of
yeah.
the options.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know.
Okay.
And back to Stitch as well. So the last session I had with you, we decided to move from doing the lunging where we don't direct him too much,
Mm-hmm.
and then to walking him around on the arena like I do with Pablo. He really struggles with that. He struggles with me still being too close to him. He can't cope.
Does he start
He
getting
gets
a little
really
pushy and nippy?
nippy, really
Okay.
nippy, and quite escalated. So um, I'm just going to, yeah, what are your thoughts for me to kind of continue with him for the next couple of weeks before our next session about Stitch? Shall I go back to the kind of just do the
I
lunging with
think
him or?
he needs the supported work and
Mm,
the hand walking because he's getting like once he's let go of that tension that he was holding in his
mm-hmm,
body, all of a
yeah,
sudden he looks visibly more like Pablo in that he's kind of almost on the
wiggly and,
too loose side rather than the too
mm-hmm,
tight side. And that's
yeah,
always telling you that the layer of chronic muscle contraction that's been holding him together is his coordination is good enough that that muscle use holding his stability has let go. But
mm-hmm,
the skeletal coordination isn't yet good enough for him to become stable. So
mm,
that's where the horses need guidance. And so what I would say, because horses that tend to nip or get aggressive in any way, shape, or form, they're always telling us that they kind of like a little bit more personal space. They're not
mm,
touchy-feely horses. They're not
yeah,
they're
yeah,
not
don't touch
snuggle
me.
bunnies. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I wish
And
he was, but he's not.
he may be one day, but they
Okay.
don't start off that way. And he has to feel a whole lot safer and just more comfortable in his own skin before he can show affection. Because his
Mm-hmm,
defensive mode is don't come near me. So the
mm,
hand walking is going to put you in that proximity. That's why I wasn't quite sure it would work. So what I
mm-hmm,
would try to transition to is look up the long rein exercise. And in the new groundwork workbook that you have, there's
mm-hmm,
a lesson on how to introduce them. That's
mm-hmm,
important to go through first if you've never done
yeah,
them or if he's never done them. I would do them in a
yeah,
regular halter.
yeah,
You can use two matching lunge lines if you don't have actual
yeah,
long
I've got them.
lines.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but when you start, you sort of work from one side of the horse. So in case he gets disturbed or he takes off, your safety
yeah,
valve is basically you're on a lunge line with the inside rein and you can
yeah,
make the outside rein loose and there's no
yeah,
chance of him getting hurt. Um,
yeah.
but I would look at doing the introductory exercise and then working your way into long reins on a straight line.
Mm-hmm,
Um, that's more like a ground driving, like
yeah,
training a horse to a cart.
yeah, yeah.
And so horses that lose forward, which he might be in that phase for a little bit as he's regaining his stability, when we work on the long reins from directly behind, like ground driving, that encourages more forward motion. If he's
Mm-hmm,
too forward, then the introductory phase is easy to just slip into, sort of basically lunging with an outside rein.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And so you can
Yeah.
do circles on the lunge on the long reins as a way to
Yeah.
give him more support on the circle if he has a lot of forward. And if he doesn't
Yeah.
have any forward, then drive from behind him and kind of follow the rail.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That sounds good. And just a normal web halter, not a rope halter.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Okay. Yeah.
important. The action of the long reins works primarily with the spinal alignment and
Mm-hmm.
spinal rotation. So when we're
Yeah.
working from the inside of the horse, the way the long reins work addresses more the sort of twisting, tilting effect. And when we work
Yeah.
directly behind them, it works more on the alignment of the spine.
Yeah. Okay.
So if,
Yeah.
like with Pablo, who's so wiggly wiggly, working from
Yeah.
behind him is just to reduce that lateral bending. And then
Yeah.
when we work on the inside, we're resisting the tilting effect of the pelvis and the rolling of the barrel. And either
Yeah. Okay.
way, if I have a horse with a lot of forward, I work from the inside and do circles. If I have a horse that barely wants to move forward, I work behind them on a straight line. And so
Yeah.
that way,
Yeah. Okay.
whatever
That's
forward
good
they
to know.
offer you, you don't have to deal with too fast or too slow. You're just really
Yeah.
working on the feel of the long reins to
Yeah.
stabilize those two spinal functions and kind of the stability of the hindquarters. And
Mm-hmm.
so that
Yeah.
should help. It would help both of your horses a lot. It's one of my favorite groundwork exercises,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
when you don't have like a surcingle or the saddle holding up the long reins,
Yeah.
it's hard for the human to kind of get the right amount of tension and changing the tension
Yeah.
on the long reins. And so
Yeah.
it's a tricky exercise for humans to learn, but
Yeah.
it's a really beneficial exercise for the horses.
Yeah. I have done a bit of long reining, but it's only ever been with a surcingle. So, um, we shall
Yeah.
see.
No,
However,
and
yeah, no,
it can,
that sounds a good plan.
yeah, it can be a really big mess. And it's basically the amount of tension you require on both reins all the time that has to adjust to what the horse is doing. If
Mm-hmm.
you keep both long reins above the hocks, you'll
Yes.
kind of keep them out of trouble. But what that
Yeah.
means is you have to constantly adjust the length of the long reins at first to get the
Mm-hmm.
feel for what amount of tension is the right amount of tension. But
Yeah.
you get a much more direct feel. And so if you
Mm-hmm.
read through those, I think there's 3 long rein exercises in the groundwork workbook.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'll
all,
read through them. I have read them once, but I'll have another read, make sure I'm onto it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And just
Yeah.
take your
Okay.
time with the introductory phase because already that's quite a bit of support for the horse.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And you know the exercise that you do where you walk in front of them on a long lead,
Hmm.
and then have them follow you slowly. Do you think that would also be helpful for Stitch?
It
If
could
I was
be.
to,
Yeah, like I just put a video up on YouTube of a new horse in my barn, Rarely Wrong.
I thought,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's primarily an exercise I use for bringing down the energy level, especially with
Mm,
like, horses that are in extreme fight or flight. And it's a way that I used to get really dangerous horses from point A to point B. So, like
mm,
we talked about maybe taking Pablo out on a bushwalk, that
yeah,
would be a strategy I would use out in the bush if he really started
yeah,
to kind of lose the plot. Like
yeah, yeah,
it's a kind of anytime exercise that's the movement of your body when you're walking does 2 things. It keeps grabbing the horse's attention without any pressure on the halter or anything like that, and it
mm,
regulates the walk. So
Yeah, yeah,
if they get stuck, you help them move forward, and if they get too fast, there's a lot of brief halts that have to be put in there. And
yeah.
so
And you're fairly safe because you're at such a distance. So yeah,
that's up to
rather than
you.
kind of walking right next to them. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And the less I trust a horse, I might use a 20-foot line or a lunge line instead of a long lead rope. But I've
yeah.
had to do it kind of spontaneously with horses that were just coming apart at the seams. I've had to do it like take the reins over their head and use the reins or use a
Yeah,
very
yeah,
short lead rope. So you
yeah.
could, the principle is get their mental focus on you
Mm,
instead of all
mm.
the things that are scaring them, and
Yeah,
then work between halt and walk to physiologically start to bring the body energy down.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds good. Yep.
Yeah. So that's something you could do with any horse at any time when they start to get too excited. So, like if it's a windy day or the situation changes or something out of the
Mm,
blue happens and they just get really spooked.
freak out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's something I use for moderate to high levels of fear. So
Hmm.
whether
Yeah.
it's aggression or whether it's anxiety, I go, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Fear is fear. So that
Yeah.
distance that you set with a whip or a rope or your energy, that's just to protect you. And so
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
just saying you don't get to run me over and you don't get to pull away. Those are the only
Yeah.
two things you can't do.
Yeah. 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 I like it. It's a good tool to have in your pocket, I think. So
Yeah, it's amazingly powerful. And when I used to take in stallions in training, and most of my staff were, 13-year-old girls who wanted lessons. These young girls could get the stallions in and out from turnout to
yeah.
stalls using that technique. And
Yeah. Okay.
it kind of became what we did at the barn if the horse was hard to handle. And then
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
stayed safe.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it. That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
I
good.
know
Okay.
a
Thank you
lot
for that.
of a lot of the techniques I've developed have been out of pure frustration and, save your
Got to make
bacon
it
kind
work somehow.
of make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there
Okay.
are so many different ways people do it, isn't there? Leading horses. And I've never found one that's quite sits well with me like this one does. Like, I don't know, people,
Well, what's
I've
so
never felt,
interesting, like in the horse world, just like in school, we always think 1 + 1 = 2. Like that's sort of how we're
mm,
trained to think. And I was listening to
yeah,
this great interview with Ellen Lenger, anyways, and she goes, when we think conceptually, which is what our horses push us into, one plus
mm,
one in the real world doesn't always equal two. And her example
mm.
was if you take 1 wad of chewed gum and another wad of chewed gum and you stick them together, you have 1 wad of chewed gum. And it's like, so 1 + 1 = 1. And
Yeah, yeah,
I just thought, oh, that's really when we
mm,
say lead a horse, everybody thinks at the head,
mm,
short grip on the
yeah.
shank.
Where you
And
can get jumped on quite easy.
yeah, and I go, there's about a million ways to lead a horse if your
Mm,
primary objective is to get safely from point A to point B without anybody getting killed. I go, you
yeah,
have to
yeah,
look for alternative strategies.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I like it. It's very good.
Okay.
Very good.
So we'll take a look at Pablo now.
Mm-hmm. And so it's
Okay.
not the most riveting filming for 20 minutes, as you'll see.
No, I have been dying to see how he's doing because I haven't heard. I know you had a lot of issues at the beginning with
Yeah,
because hand walking sounds easy enough. Like you just assume every horse can walk, and to just walk him along the
I
rail.
mean, he's a lot easier than Stitch, but he's not easy as in he's just so not forward.
Yeah. And
Anyway,
it's just different. Like, no horse comes without problems. And
Mm-hmm.
so the difference is Stitch goes forward easy, but he bites.
Yep.
So you have sometimes with Stitch too much forward and too
Mm.
much biting. But then the problem with Pablo is not enough forward. So when we
Yep.
start to think in terms of balance, I go, no particular quality is good or bad. We just
Yeah.
have too much or
It's what
too
it is.
little.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I go,
Yeah.
whenever we have too little of something or too much of something, what that tells us is we have to start developing skills in the opposite side of the scale.
Mm-hmm.
This is so interesting. So this is about as forward as he's been.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
can see he's already not nearly as wiggly as what I saw on the lunge line. Like
Mm-hmm.
he looks a lot more stable, but now you can see sort of the asymmetry in the leg movement. You can see the stiffness through the muscles, and you can see he's not super, like, it doesn't look efficient, easy, and comfortable when he moves.
No.
That's why he lacks forward. That's why he gets
Mm-hmm.
stuck. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So
Yep.
that was really nice. Is this a friend or family member? Or is that you leading?
Who? No, that's me.
Oh, that is you. Your hair looks
That's
different.
me. Yeah.
It looks brown.
Oh,
Is-
okay. No, it's in a ponytail.
Yeah.
My daughter's filming for me.
Okay. So your timing on that was fantastic. Just sort of pausing, putting a little light pressure on the lead rope. But it was interesting that he stopped in the corner during the turn where he's a little more forward
Mm.
down the long sides.
Yep.
Yeah, and the problem, like, I'm not opposed to giving a horse a sharp or firm correction if that's what I think is needed to sort of say, hey, a little more effort, right? But if I
Mm-hmm.
whack a horse or touch a horse with a whip and it has to be firm, by the second time I have to be firm, I already know this isn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So instead
And
of
it
just,
doesn't with him. You could probably whack him and he'd just ignore you.
yeah, like I had a horse I worked with last week that was, he kept stopping to eat grass and he wasn't very forward and it was hard to keep him going. And so I gave him one good pop with the long tail of the long reins and
Mm-hmm.
he barely budged. And it was a pretty good pop with the line, right? And I went,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, that's not good." Right? But
Mm-hmm.
he didn't jump at it even though it was pretty firm, but he did go forward. So then he stopped again. I tried the same amount of pressure a second time, and the second time he barely reacted and it took longer for him to go forward. So
Mm-hmm.
already that kind of response tells me giving this horse pressure will never work and it will only cause him to shut down.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
go 2 tries max because by the third try, they're going to learn something new that I don't want them to learn, right? Which is
Yeah.
how to shut down and take pressure. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why with Pablo, if he's not ready to move forward from the whip, and you tried repeating it, you tried different strategies, you even tried being firm and nothing was working, it's not
Mm-hmm.
it it's a bigger issue than him not listening to an aid. There's a deeper
Yeah.
reason, right? But
Yes.
getting the movement is always the path to healing. So I go,
Mm-hmm.
how could we? But it has to be movement that also, preferably, the body is dominant in the parasympathetic nervous system. That's where the healing takes place, is
Mm-hmm.
that kind of equation. We need dominance of the parasympathetic nervous system in motion.
Yeah.
And then the body starts to heal itself. Right. So this is
Mm-hmm.
pretty good. He's still sticky enough, even with you leading him. He's a little sticky through the corners, which makes sense
Mm-hmm.
with the instability of his hindquarter and sort of the stiffness of his hind
Mm-hmm.
legs. What I think is fantastic is he's already looks more relaxed through his top line and his neck than the lunging video because he's gotten more
Mm.
stable,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that stability of the skull, spine, and pelvis skeletally is what releases tension through the top line,
Mm-hmm.
right? And where he's sort of a little bit sticky is like most horses, as that midline gets more stable, that neck starts to lengthen because the muscles are
Mm-hmm.
releasing chronic tension. And all horses slow down and stop frequently as soon as they start to lengthen the neck. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're working with a horse that's barely moving forward to begin with, it's another reason they stop. But even horses like Stitch, who maybe want to go, 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 as soon as you stabilize that midline and they lengthen the neck, even they have trouble going forward,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
So the good news is, as much as you're still having to be pretty patient. It's a work in progress, but when he's moving, he's very calm. His ears
Mm-hmm.
have his ears half out the way they are shows you an internal concentration. He's paying
Mm-hmm.
attention to what he's feeling, right? The
Yeah, okay.
fact the fact that he's moving with his neck long and he's on sort of using the fence for support, using you for support, but going on a straighter path of travel, that's
Mm-hmm.
beginning to stabilize his body more and more. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just difficult for him. And so he, like in the corners, which the turns, the corners, the circles, that's what requires a little bit of extra engagement and stability from the hindquarter. And
Yeah.
so if those are the places he's stopping most often, then I would go, oh, that's probably because he's doing it better and it's hard.
Right. Yeah,
So
okay.
so just like backing up, it's the
Mm-hmm.
corners, turns, and circles and going backwards all dynamically kind of engage the hindquarters more,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or canter
Yeah.
work. That's another natural moment of extra engagement for horses.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that he's starting to kind of get a little bit of rhythm. The frequent halting tells you you can't hardly make this exercise any easier. So this is what you need to do until he doesn't stop so frequently. He's such a
Yeah,
clown.
he
That's
is.
funny. Yeah, but he's thoughtful, he's calm, and it's not taking a tremendous amount of pressure to get him to follow you and follow the lead rope. And I like that
Mm-hmm.
once in a while you kind of drop back more parallel to the head, to the neck, to the shoulder, because it's different to the horse if we're out in front of the nose or if we're next to them or if we're a little bit back behind the front leg. All of those body positions make a difference to the horse.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I have found when he's the few moments that he is a little bit more forward and I can go to his shoulder, it's good. But quite often he then slows down. So I'm finding I have to be at the front a little bit more.
yeah,
But
and just keep doing that. When he is forward, shift your body position for as long as he can maintain it. And then as soon as he
yeah,
stops or he gets stuck, just go back in front of him and kind of get him moving again.
yeah, yeah.
And then how long are you able to, because this is about a 10-minute video. And
Yeah, we did
so,
about 10 minutes either way. both ways.
Oh, great. Okay.
And that's probably the most we've been able to do.
Okay. And then have you tried taking him out, like you said, on a bushwalk at all?
I haven't yet, but that's I shall attempt that.
Okay.
It's been really windy. It doesn't look windy there. That day was nice and calm, but it's been so windy here lately that I'm not a fan of taking them out when it's windy. But
No,
I
and that
shall.
may be, so think of, because at this point, we're more a little bit in the category of leading rather than hand walking. So if
Yeah.
he's super energetic, you can always use that walking backwards version, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or throw
Yeah.
in some halts. And the power of that relationship when we walk backwards and we get them to face us is what I've learned as a small person. That's the most amount of leverage you have to hold on to a horse that wants to pull away.
Mm-hmm.
Because once they turn their nose away from us, if they want to
Yeah.
pull the rope out of our hands, they have the leverage on us, right?
Yeah.
So by
Yeah.
kind of keeping the nose aimed at you, when a horse gets really excited, it's a strategy for hanging on to them as much as anything else. It's harder for them to pull the rope out of your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is the
Yeah.
second video, but you can go between
Yeah.
basically um, walking backwards with lots of halts is one version of leading. What you're doing, sort of like
Mm-hmm.
half dragging him forward, is another version of leading. And then
Yeah.
being next to the head or neck and him synchronizing with you is kind of the final outcome of leading,
Yeah. That's what we're
right?
aiming for, that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if he can go next to you and not be reliant on a little tug on the lead rope, then when he can do that for a solid 10 to 15 minutes without stopping, or 10 minutes each way without stopping and needing a break, that's him
Mm-hmm.
telling you he might be ready to try the hand walking again.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Okay.
and we don't think this is a big deal, but obviously his core muscles that are supporting, his spine and his stability have just weakened to a point that his legs are stiff and uncomfortable and he just doesn't want to move. That will
Mm-hmm.
change. You're going to have to kind of do what you can do and keep increasing the time, even if he needs a little rest break throughout the time.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, "Oh, I got to manage the minis."
They're my friends.
Yeah. Um, but he's looking more forward from the
Yeah.
conversations we were having. And
Yeah.
so just the act of walking while he's calm, while he's focused, he will figure out how to get himself more comfortable. He'll release patterns of tension. He'll build up a little muscle. He'll kind of, oil up those joints that maybe haven't been working in a while. And it'll just keep
Mm-hmm.
getting, the more frequently you can work him, not necessarily longer, but what horses
Mm-hmm.
will not do on their own, because we provide food and water, is they won't walk for long periods. And that
No.
starts to create a cascade of different issues for horses. So, because he's had a lot of time off, he's been out of training a while, he's just weakened over time. And what you're doing in this video is perfect. Like, there's not much you could do that would be easier for him in motion,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I'm just going to put my dogs out. They're coming into the room and now they're making a noise. I'll be 2 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right. Oh, that was quick. I didn't even pause the recording. Hang on, let me share the screen
Oh, it's
again.
okay. Now she's banging on the door.
I know. I have a cat that acts like a dog. And it's like the scratching at the door, the following me around, or I get the cat tail through the
Yeah,
Zoom meeting. I know.
yeah, yeah, they're cute.
Oh my God, that's a classic look right there.
Yeah, it's
It's
like I
so
don't want to
funny.
move. I'm not moving.
Yeah. What are you doing back there? Yeah. So that little step off to the side is a really good way to keep not get into the tug of war with the halter and lead rope. I think
Hmm.
you do need the rope halter for now and the heavy lead rope. I think that's to your
Yeah,
advantage with him.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, you're just doing a great job with what he's able to give you. But yeah, watching him just being led around the arena, I see exactly why he was like, yeah, that's just not going to happen with the hand walking and the whip and all of that because
Yeah.
he's he's getting there. Like I never can estimate a time frame because horses, they respond to things so uniquely. But Pablo will tell you when he's ready to do anything other than exactly what you're doing, right? So, like right
Hmm.
there, what I would do with every session is when you put that light tug on the lead line, yeah, walk off
Hmm.
to the side a tiny bit sooner and a tiny bit
Okay.
sooner each time, right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
what you want to move towards at this point is less halting, more moving. And even if
Okay.
you have to, like what you're doing, even if you completely forget about the rail and you just wander around the arena on a backward serpentine to keep him
Hmm.
moving, I would say do your best, like a shorter pause when he halts and a little bit
Okay. Yeah.
more encouragement to keep the feet moving the whole 10 minutes.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So
Yep.
without, as soon as he's moving, you do a really good job releasing the pressure on the halter. But like right
Hmm.
there, I would be a little more active, moving off to the side and say, you're
Hmm.
good.
Sooner.
Let's keep going.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
the only
So try
way.
not to let him stop at all, really. Try and keep his
Yeah.
feet moving.
Yeah. Like once he halts, maybe the count of three at the most before the feet are moving again. So
Hmm.
by the
Okay.
time, like if he halts and you go 1, 2, 3, he's back in motion, or at least you're trying to
Hmm.
get him back in motion.
Yeah. Yeah. And one question, and can't remember if he does it in this session, but he's done it before where, and I think I read through your notes where it's them coming from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic, where they look like they're zoning out a little bit.
Mm.
And he then looks like he's going to sleep. If he happens to do that when he stops, do I just leave him?
Well, it kind of depends. Like if a horse is coming out of super high levels of energy,
Hmm.
th then
Which he's not.
right, then that shift of nervous system would be my priority. So if a horse was
Yeah.
going from an extreme or moderate level of energy towards calmness, then the moment
Hmm.
they started to show that sleepy look, I would sort of abandon ship on my exercise and focus on that. In this
Okay. Yeah.
case,
Yeah.
where his energy is pretty low, it's
Hmm.
it's just as important, but his is more a physical struggle than it is a fear-based issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in this case, what I would do is encourage consistent motion for something reasonable, like 10 minutes, and
Hmm.
then maybe give him a rest for 5 minutes. And in that 5-minute rest, if he looks like he's really falling asleep and he's kind of ears half back, like he's a lot of body workers call it processing. It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
the body and the nervous system catching up. Then you could
Mm-hmm.
wait longer than 5 minutes and let him go through that during a rest period.
Okay.
But because his
Yep.
issues are, I think, are much more a physical issue than they are a fear issue. That's the only reason I
Mm-hmm.
would say try to get a 10-minute chunk of solid
Mm-hmm.
movement. And then even if you need to rest for 10 minutes to let him process it, that's fine. And then if you can
Okay.
get a second chunk of 10 minutes of movement, he can again have a long rest period in order to process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not
Yep.
wrong what you're doing because sometimes if we insist on those 10 minutes of solid movement too soon, it almost demoralizes them. So I'm only saying that now from what I'm seeing on the video, he's following you pretty easily. And
Mm-hmm.
the first 10 minutes, when you put a little bit of pressure on the lead rope, he moved forward sooner than what he's doing the second 10 minutes,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So you can kind of watch that amount of time and pressure it takes to get his feet back in motion. I would say with some certainty, he could do 10 minutes of solid walking for sure without having
Mm-hmm.
to rest very long. If he halts, he
Mm-hmm.
halts, but by the count of three, he's walking again,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
if that, like, he almost needs you to be his cheerleader to believe in him that he can do that,
Mm.
right? And part of the point of putting together a solid chunk is in the process of motion is where he needs to find comfort.
Yeah.
Right now,
Yeah.
he only believes that comfort lives at halt, and
Mm-hmm.
movement is discomfort, and halt equals comfort. But like right now,
Yep.
that sleepy look on his face and his ears half back, if I was getting more resistance on my second round of 10 minutes within a session of movement,
Mm-hmm.
and he was getting heavier, he was stopping more frequently, and when we stopped, he looked like he looks right this minute, falling asleep, that kind of thing. Then I would take a longer rest period right then and there. If it was
Okay.
the second set of 10 minutes.
Yes. Yep.
But I would really think at this point, asking him to stay in a walk for the when he first comes out, when he's as fresh as a daisy as he can be, I would say let's keep going for 10
Mm-hmm.
minutes and then we'll take a break. And
Yeah. Okay.
you could even be done, put him away for a half an hour and do another 10 minutes later. Or you could rest for 5 minutes and see if he's ready to go the other way for 10 minutes. Or you could
Yeah.
rest for 10 minutes and see if he could do another 10 minutes. That second 10 minutes is where you're going to have to navigate a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the sign of fatigue for him, like right now, he's light on the lead rope, he's walking very willingly, right? And if he pauses, like we'll watch this, you give him a little tug. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, he's walking again. Not too bad, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you were just a hair firmer, he would have walked by the count of three instead of the count of six. But even
Mm-hmm.
at the count of six, this shows me he's still got the energy to keep working.
Yeah.
So I would keep going, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it starts to be double the amount of pressure on the lead rope And now it's taking to the count of 6, 10, 12, 15, a little bit of sideways motion to get him moving again. That would be a sign he's
Mm-hmm.
starting to fatigue,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So for the most part, it's a pretty light, easy correction that works quickly when you ask him to start
Mm-hmm.
moving. In that case, me being me, I would sort of push it to see how long he could walk. You know,
Yeah.
in 10-minute increments with at least a 5-minute rest in between.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
that would be fair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it starts to take more and more effort on my part just to get him to move, then I'd go, okay, I guess we're done. Like,
Okay.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter the time, but I would set a
Mm-hmm.
goal of going, if he could walk for a solid 10 minutes once a day,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to start to see a
Mm-hmm.
lot more progress, a lot more forward, a lot more voluntary forward starting to come through.
Yeah.
And but by looking at the videos, I don't think it's asking too much of him. It's not going to make him, less comfortable. It's only going to make
Mm-hmm.
him better. And
Yeah.
like he really doesn't resist you too bad. But the frequency of the halts and
Mm.
the amount of time and effort it takes to regain the motion, that's him telling you it's starting to feel too hard.
Mm.
And at that
Yeah.
point, no matter what my plan was, that's him telling me I'm getting fatigued and there's no point of trying to
Mm-hmm.
push through fatigue. I go, it doesn't help anybody. And
No.
so and that's where, even if I end with a horse on a bad note, I just
Mm-hmm.
completely throw that concept in the garbage because I go,
Mm.
I try to push the training to sort of the maximum physical change I can achieve, which means I
Mm-hmm.
often end on a bad note because I've fatigued the horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so once I recognize the signs of fatigue, I go, okay, we're done. Let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah. So
I get an extra, sometimes I get an extra 5 or 10 minutes of the change I've been looking for and that I didn't
exactly.
expect. So if I stick to the clock, I may be getting less or more, right? Or I may be
Mm-hmm.
pushing him too much or not enough. But when you start
Yeah.
reading him, what you'll see is session by session, that first 10 minutes of walking will become easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So shall I aim for obviously do the first 10 minutes, then have a break, and then try the second 10 minutes? If he does that, then have a break and kind of try and continue on until he
Yep.
basically says can't do anymore.
Yep.
Until it starts to get too hard to move him, and then I'll put him away.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
what will sort of be easiest for him is do the first 10 minutes in the direction that's easiest for him. Like if you notice a difference between tracking right or tracking left, although it doesn't much matter at this point what direction you're
So
going.
far we've only gone this way because I think this was his weakest side. I think this was the side where he was
Yes, he's
yeah, he
much
needs a bit
stiffer
more
on
support.
the right hind.
Yeah, so we actually haven't even gone the other way, but do you think I should now start to balance it out a bit more?
You could try it because changing direction really is harder when it comes to balance than changing speed. And so
Okay.
when I have a horse that's starting to fatigue, sometimes changing direction is almost a bit of a fresh start. So you may
Okay. Yeah.
find that you get 2 10-minute sessions if you do 10 minutes one direction, give them a rest, and then your second
Mm-hmm.
10 minutes is the opposite direction. That might
Yep.
give him a little more juice to keep walking.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay.
Because what'll happen is on the one direction, the better he uses himself, which is what happens is as they start thinking about finding comfort in motion, which is what his energy and his mental focus is telling me. He's really
Mm-hmm.
looking for how to get comfortable in this job. And there's nothing to
Mm-hmm.
fight against, nothing to scare him. And he looks so much more stable than the last video I saw. So you've made big improvements. But what that
Oh, good.
also means is however he's using his muscles on this direction, they're going to fatigue
Mm-hmm.
pretty fast. And so when you
Mm.
reverse direction, it just helps alter the muscle use enough that you
Mm-hmm.
have some fresh energy to work with.
Energy. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, but I'm
Yeah.
loving what I'm seeing, and it's it's a bit of a shock, I think, for us to think, oh, just walking is really this hard? Are you kidding me?
Mm.
But as he's stabilizing his walk, he's really working some core muscles that in the last video, all that looseness that we looked at, those muscles have now started to strengthen and do their job. So even like
Mm-hmm.
in this shot, when we see him walking away, there's
Mm-hmm.
not so much tilt to the pelvis. Uh, there's
Yeah.
there's not other than when he, bites a fly or whatever, but there's not
Yeah.
that sort of noodliness down his middle.
Yeah. 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 And when I get my daughter to film, is this the angle that you want, or do you want all angles?
All angles are good. I keep smiling because this angle, it, I don't know if you ever saw that Saturday Night Live thing where the guy goes, "Bum looker, you bum looker, you cheeky monkey bum looker." And it's like every time Pablo turns his head around, I keep thinking, "You bum looker." But no,
I'll have to see that.
all the different angles are really good because sometimes it helps to see from the side how's the neck use, how's the barrel, and from
Mhm.
behind, if you go back and look at some of the video of him on the lunge line, you'll really, I think, see a difference in him walking a straight line, how much more stable that hindquarter is compared to
Mhm.
trying to do a circle where, all that steering was in and out, and he just looked very
Yeah.
wobbly and weak through the
Yeah.
hindquarter. He's just
Yeah.
massively improved that stability through the midline. And it's a global
Mm. Yeah.
change it's a super complex system. The only way we can kind of
Mhm.
make it simple is not messing too much with speed and direction, a little bit of guidance. Looking at the overall posture tells us we're on a good track or a bad track for the body. And him
Mhm.
lengthening the neck almost the entire time, right? His voluntary sort of
Mhm.
lengthening the neck during motion is the best we can ask him to do right now until the
Mhm.
body adapts and the motion feels easier, more efficient, and more comfortable for him.
Mhm. Yeah.
So you could walk him anywhere. You might find if you cut across the arena and he's really wobbly, then the fence line might be helping him more than you realize. Like
Okay.
I tend to walk horses up against a fence line because it actually helps with the internal straightness, even if I'm leading.
Mhm.
But try changing direction. If he gets really
Mhm.
stuck, walk backwards, go wherever, see how he
Yeah.
does with that. Um,
Mhm.
and and the only other thing you can do to really, and I've had to do this before, a lot of times horses that are unstable like this, they lack forward because they're unstable and they're uncomfortable. And the only thing that gets a little bit of forward is if they get nervous. So I'll take
Mhm.
them and work with them in an area that brings up the nervousness, which is really fear energy. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't want too much. I don't want it to become unmanageable. But if they get really stuck in a safe area, then I'll take them and work them in an area that's a little more stimulating,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yep.
on a day that's more stimulating, and see if
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't help me get my 10 minutes in.
Yep. Yep. Okay,
And
that sounds good.
the tricky part of that is if they go into dominance of the sympathetic nervous system and start
Mm.
pumping a bunch of stress hormones, you're kind of defeating the purpose. So you're looking
Yeah,
for that. You want,
balance.
yeah, because you can trigger that sympathetic nervous system a little bit to gain some energy, but if it takes over the body, then you're not getting much healing, even though you're getting more walking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
it
just,
tended to go up like a giraffe if he was too nervous.
yeah, yeah. So
Yep.
it's kind of that line where he's a little excited, but not fearful, that'll put some energy into
Mm-hmm.
the forward without losing his mind.
Yeah.
Because, and what they
Yep.
call that, like, when we're playing sports, of course, our sympathetic nervous system is operating. But what we call nervous system cohesion is where we still can focus and think, and we're excited, or even enthusiastic, but not terrified. So that's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
line, is when you hit a fear threshold that starts to release all the stress hormones, you're working against the health of the body. But a little bit
Yeah.
of excitement or fast speeds or things that make us sweat, that's more of a cohesion of the sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system working in harmony.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
that's what you could play with a little bit. I don't think you're going to need to. I think he's perfectly willing, and you've made
Yeah.
a lot of progress just walking him in the arena. So the
Yeah.
safer he
Yeah.
feels, the faster they heal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Good, good.
And he's trying for you. I think, is the halting becoming less and less frequent?
Yeah, I think this session that we had was probably the best one that we've had so far.
Oh, good. Okay.
So, yeah.
So he
Yeah.
still may need a couple of halts, and I
Mm-hmm.
would just encourage him, because he does listen to you. When you encourage him to move, it doesn't take a tremendous amount of pressure. So I
Mm-hmm.
would just, once he halts, instead of pausing and waiting, which is what we have to do in the beginning, I would just
Mm-hmm.
sort of gently correct him and say, could we get moving by the count of three? And
Yeah.
try to make the halt time uh last less time, and the
Mm-hmm.
walking last more time. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
he can
Yeah.
halt as frequently as he likes. You're just going to sort of encourage him to get moving again a tiny bit quicker.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, but this is really good. Really good. And
Oh,
it's going
good.
to be a very slow start with Pablo, but
Mm-hmm.
once his body starts to kind of come back online for him, you'll see things speed up a lot. But
Okay.
giving him a very gentle exercise program, because that much resistance to the hand walking and use of the whip, I go, okay, he's shouting at us that he needs a much
Mm-hmm.
gentler, easier approach.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like starting at 0.1.
Yeah. But I'm starting at that with Rarely. Even though Rarely Wrong is very physically fit, she's really not got her confidence, and all that anxiety. I can't help her body with that much
Mm,
anxiety ruling the show. I
mm,
go, and
mhm.
she has issues with her hooves, and she has spinal stenosis, so it's not, I'm still walking backwards with her and sitting at halt for an hour. Like that's where
Mhm.
she is, and she's in her teens.
Yeah. 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 Oh, she looked really young. I thought she was a young horse. I mean, young, 13 is young, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think she's maybe 15 going on 2,
Oh,
but
yeah, yeah. Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
Pablo's now two.
he's what?
He's 10.
He's 10. Okay. And so the age doesn't matter. It's like when we learn to
Hmm.
meet the horse and listen to what they're telling us, we will always make progress work meeting them where they're at.
Yeah, yeah.
But sometimes it's like we get these ideas that at this age it should be this, or this is what Rarely Wrong used to do in the past. She should do it now because she's done it before. And I go, none of that
Yeah.
matters.
Mm, yeah. And
None
I've
of that
tried so
matters.
many, different trainers and everything, and it's just gone around in big circles because physically he hasn't been okay. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just, yeah, we end
And
up in all sorts of bother.
no, and the horse I have in the Wexford training barn named Hercules was very similar to Pablo. It was a
Hmm.
very slow start. And
Hmm.
and I didn't know at the time, like the reason I became so respectful of what the horse offers is because I've had a bunch of horses I've worked with that have been labeled as lazy or stubborn or bad conformation or whatever. And they
Hmm.
just had really hard to figure out, hard to diagnose, significant physical reasons that they were uncomfortable.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah.
And so now when I look at a horse like Pablo, I go, I have no idea if there is some hard to diagnose physical reason that he is like this. And so we're going to be
Hmm.
gentle. And
Mm.
even if there is some horrible physical reason that would cost you thousands of dollars to diagnose and treat, I go,
Hmm.
unless Pablo tells us that's necessary, why do
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? If you're patient, maybe whatever, if he has a physical issue, maybe it can be worked out. If we're patient and we're
Mm.
kind and we let him guide us.
Yeah. Yeah. And if he builds his muscles up, around to support his body, it might just go away.
Yeah. And so even though it's sort of slow and simple, what I would look for to measure progress, to know that what you're doing is helping, is that right now, you said this was the best one so far where he stopped the least. So
Hmm.
I would look for my first 10 minutes. We come out, we go straight into our walk, and we try to do the least amount of halting as possible for those 10 minutes, and then we take a break.
Hmm.
What I would consider a big sign of progress is he doesn't offer to halt the first 10 minutes, knowing that he's going to get a 5-minute rest. So,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
if it's just him understanding it's only 10 minutes and then I get to rest and it's a mental thing, then he'll change his walk and walk those whole 10 minutes within the first, say, 2 to 3 to 4 sessions. If it's a
Hmm.
physical reason that he's halting, then it'll take longer to get him to volunteer 10 minutes of walk. And
Hmm.
that would be kind of the first sign I would look for is,
Yeah. Yeah.
if it's just sort of him not knowing when he's going to get a rest, he might be halting to take his rest as he can. And if
Hmm.
he 2 or 3 sessions of going, oh, if I walk for 10 minutes, and I swear horses have an internal timer that's very accurate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, if I walk for my 10 minutes, then I get a nice long break. And so if it's
Hmm.
just that anticipation part, he'll start walking for 10 minutes right away. And if it's a physical
Hmm.
reason, it's still a comfort issue, a core strength issue, even though he knows he's going to get a break after 10 minutes, He'll still halt about the same amount, maybe a few less times in that first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
frequently he chooses to halt is a really good gauge of him communicating to you.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And the first big, huge sign of progress would be 10 minutes without him offering to halt at all. You've made a significant improvement. Don't know what it is, don't know how it manifested,
Yeah.
but he's comfortable enough to not halt for 10 minutes, then that would be the first sign of a big breakthrough.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
that's
that's
why
good.
I'm kind of saying speed up the correction a tiny bit, just to encourage
Yeah.
him to work it out.
Yep. Yep.
I love all his spots.
Isn't he cute?
Hmm.
Pretty boy.
Yeah. No, and they say with Appaloosas, every spot represents an opinion.
Oh, yes. Yeah, he's a bit of a character.
Yeah. He goes, quit looking at my bum. Yeah. No, but it's a good shot. It's a good angle to sort of see his hind legs looking more stable, his pelvis looking more stable,
Mm-hmm.
and he just looks a whole lot less noodly and wobbly.
Yeah.
Cutie pie. Any other questions?
No, that's really good.
Mm,
Really good. I'm pleased now how they're
oops.
going.
Stop the share.
So my two challenging horses. Mm.
Yeah, and with the changes you got with Stitch, he'll act a little bit like what you felt with Pablo as he's
Mm-hmm.
going through the process of change. But I would
Yeah.
say if he's not ready for you to be in close proximity, he's still a little bit
Mm-hmm.
defensive and nippy at you when you do the hand walking. The
Mm-hmm.
next best thing would be the long reins, where you can get some
Yeah.
distance, but you can still
Yeah.
offer the support.
Yeah. Yeah. Some straight lines. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I shall attempt that. That will be good.
Yeah,
Hmm. Brilliant. I mean,
excellent.
all right. Thank you so much.
All right, let me stop the recording.